All right. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining me this morning, Bryan.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So it would not be a morning for me without my favorite cup of coffee, which you happen to make. Yes, you've got one too. So I always start off with, what are you drinking? But of course, you're drinking your own stuff. But what blend do you have today?
Sure. So this is an iced coffee from Bolt. This is our Mass Appeal blend.
Mass Appeal. Okay, I think I had Mass Appeal like 2 weeks ago. I stopped in the other day. So for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm jumping right into the coffee conversation because this is kind of like one of those situations where I guess I don't want to say like you're meeting your idols, but I have definitely been a fan of your products for a long time. And the reason why you're here today is because someone heard me talking about Bolt Coffee on this show. And my friend Joan said, well, I can connect you to him. And so not only am I a fangirl of the coffee, but we also get to talk shop about being an entrepreneur and what it's been like for you for the past year. But before we jump into that, I really do like to take a few minutes with the coffee and remind everyone why we're here. We're here to have eye openers. We're here to have breakthroughs and insights about business, but also we got to start with something tasty. So when I stopped in, I got the Santa Barbara blend. So could you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So the Santa Barbara blend is from Honduras, from a region in Honduras called Santa Barbara. We've been roasting our own coffee for a few years now. And since the beginning, we've worked with a particular exporter out of the region. And that coffee is a kind of a compilation of a bunch of different coffees from that region. And so most of our Honduran coffees are coming out of that particular little micro region of Honduras.
Okay. And do you, like back in the day, so I know you started in 2012, but were you going and picking out these coffees yourself, or do you still go do that? Or how do you find what you're looking for?
Currently the way that the coffee trade works, zooming out a little bit, is coffees are grown between the two equators typically. And so, that's Central, South America, East Africa, West Africa, Indonesia, kind of like circles the globe. Hawaii falls into there. And the way that the coffee trade works is it's kind of like an hourglass where, it's big and then it's tiny and then it's big at the bottom. So there's 75 million coffee farmers globally. And then all of the coffee gets traded through a couple trading houses. We do most of our work through a company called Olam, which is a commodities trader. And then it goes through the middlemen and then out to all the cafes and roasteries. And so my business partner works in the green side of coffee. And so we have in-depth understanding of how the trade works and the different contacts and all that. And the way we source our coffees is largely through relationships. And so we've only been roasting for a few years, and so the relationships aren't that established. But yeah, so we connect with people. We do a lot of tasting, settle on a good cost to value, and go from there.
Great. It's always interesting to find out those little like nuances about an industry. That the hourglass, I love that illustration you gave us there. It's something you wouldn't otherwise know, right? And was probably new to you and you when you came in. Just like Dave was saying right now, I think you can see the comments on your end too. Dave's a wine guy. So I find a lot of like similarities between those two kind of industries where I love how people describe like, oh, this is a good coffee or this is a great wine, right? But so much of it really does seem to be about preference. My friends, my neighbor.
A lot of it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say my neighbor and I have this great debate where she just loves Dunkin' Donuts. And I just can't get behind it. I know like I'm going to get like a lot of heat right now, but it's just like not my thing. And so, but I don't think either of us are wrong.
Right. And so that's kind of like a mildly inflammatory situation in the coffee world, just because,
Right. I know it's
going back to the hourglass thing, there's 75 million farmers. And when we talk about specialty coffee, which is the sector of the industry that we're in, that accounts for just about 5% of
oh
the
wow.
production. So, whatever 5% or 95% of 75 million is, those are all farmers, largely substance farmers that are intergenerational or operating on intergenerational farm plots
Mhm.
that largely don't have a choice what quality their coffee is, for the most part.
Yeah.
And so, Dunkin' Donuts versus Bolt or a number of other special roasters, all the coffee has to get drunk,
Mm.
essentially.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and
So
to
I didn't mean
just
to say
keep
something
coffee to
super,
the elite. Sorry, what was that?
I didn't mean to say something super inflammatory or
No, no,
offensive.
no, no. It
Clearly,
wasn't.
I'm on your camp, but
It wasn't inflammatory. I think just in the industry, sometimes we skew towards, top of the shelf or nothing.
yeah,
And in reality, it is, everybody has to get their coffee sold essentially. So
yeah.
I think that there's a place for all coffee.
Mm, I love that. Um, so for those of us who are Rhode Islanders, you are in Providence Monthly. This month they did a whole special section on coffee and for local roasters. And well, I don't even know what page this is, but if you're looking at this page, there's your cup down there. And one thing that really stood out to me when I read what you wrote is that you're really interested in the space around coffee. So maybe around like
Mm,
the rituals or what brings us together and what that's about. Can you speak more to that?
sure. Um, so I started in coffee really young. Um, and let me think about this. So I started in coffee young, and it wasn't really in the industry. So I came at it from a different perspective. Um, Growing up, um, we had a large family, and both my parents came from large families. And it's the classic Rhode Island thing where got 75 aunts and uncles that all still live here, pretty much. And so people were coming in and out of the house all the time, and family parties were 50, 60 people.
Mhm.
And coffee was a constant through that, or at least at the end of the night or in the morning. And
Mhm.
it was this thing that kind of facilitated like the interactions a little bit.
Right. Right.
And so I was curious about that, and I got into coffee, and was really interested in um, perceived quality versus actual quality, and
Mhm.
how hospitality and service can impact a lot of our perception. Um,
Mhm.
and just coming from a big family, generous hospitality was just always a thing.
Yes.
Italian family, and so it's
Mhm.
everybody's taken care of essentially.
Yep.
Um,
There's always food to eat.
and right, and so that's kind of my perspective on the hospitality industry largely, and
Mhm.
coffee is a great component of that, where people are coming in 4 or 5 times a week, and you begin to build these relationships, and you're acting as the kind of as the arbiter of this space.
Right.
um,
Right.
and so that's how I like to think of the business.
Is
And
that what
then
led you
finding,
into retail?
yeah, yep,
Creating that space where people could really come together and you guys could
yeah, exactly.
conduit
And
of that.
coffee was a piece of it. And so my like first priority is not the drink. It's not it's not the product itself. It's the people.
Hmm.
And then we bring all onto our team people that are way better and care way more about coffee than I ever will. Um, and they're super passionate about it.
That's great. Yeah, I do know when I go in there and ask questions, they always have great answers for me and help guide me
Hmm.
what I'm looking for. So let's dive into the business side of what you do. So I want to give you a proper introduction because I know we just like stepped right into it. So a brief bio on you is that you are a Rhode Island native who likes to think of yourself as an ideas person. You started Bolt Coffee with your friend in 2012 at the age of 21, and then started Knead Donuts in 2014 with others. You focus on connecting people and not doing things alone. That's awesome to hear. That's a big part of being successful in business, right? You're a father, a partner, and you're excited to be here today. So very cool. So let's jump back into what I would consider my first real question. And this always tends to prompt a really great conversation. But what's your vision for the future as it pertains to your businesses and your industry?
Sure. So we're in the midst of a global pandemic that's pretty much ravaged the hospitality industry,
Right.
on a number of different levels. And so my vision for the future is, unknowable at this point. I think a lot of businesses will fold coming out of this. I'm hopefully optimistic that we're gonna, survive and thrive coming out of it. But I think the industry is there's gonna be a lot of changes that happen. As an industry, sure. So as an industry, I think that there are some necessary changes around just metrics and margins and like acceptable bottom line numbers. And my kind of mantra for this year is pushing for sustainability. Like there's ecological sustainability, but then there's just economic sustainability as a business.
Right.
And the past year kind of blew that whole, single digits at best margin out of the water.
Right.
So for me, looking forward, the vision for the company is a more sustainable and more sound business.
Right. Okay. And so what's your greatest opportunity in pursuing that? Like what avenues do you see? Because we're, I think yesterday was like the 1 year anniversary of it being declared a pandemic. We're making progress. We're not quite there. So what's your opportunity to get there given the current landscape?
Yeah. So it's tough. I mean, the pandemic, I think, was a blessing and a curse, and I want to be really cautious to, paint it in a good light at all. But for the industry, sometimes, a lot of times it's like an owner-operator type situation, and we're elbow deep in the business, and there's no, it's a train that's moving, and there's no time to fix the, the train tracks or the machine or whatever analogy.
Right.
And so the pandemic was a moment to kind of freak out, but also to reevaluate what needs to change, essentially. And for us as a business, we had four retail locations, and in the middle of March, all of them closed down. And so we had a brief period of, circling the wagons and trying to figure out what's going on. But two of the locations have remained closed for the past year. And, we then slowly began to open up back then. And for us, at Bolt and at Knead, we're learning about just efficiency. And, the pandemic forced our hands in a lot of ways, but, we wouldn't have made some of the decisions that we made had there not been, a crisis. And out of those decisions, we found different ways to do things because we had to.
Right.
And those ways were more productive and more efficient. And, we can produce more with a smaller crew. And just because we had to get really creative really quickly.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. I just want to acknowledge everyone who's here and commenting, really adding to the conversation. Thanks so much, Ben and Cameron and Dave and Matthew. I love Dave's comment, people before coffee, which you just kind of paraphrase from you. So you're bringing up some really important points, right? That are just the practical like decisions and whatnot that need to be made in a business. And it's not something that people always talk about. It's unsexy. It's not fun. But I guarantee that you had to make decisions like this along the way that got you to where you are today. What would you identify as some of those probably tough decisions in the time, but now as you're reflecting on it, we're like, yeah, those were some of the tough decisions that got me here.
Sure. I mean, any business is just a series of decisions, right? And sometimes you won't know the consequences of some of the decisions until later. And so oftentimes they present as really inconsequential, that end up being pretty important. And so along the way, I started really in business really young, no prior education, just, really just naively optimistic about how things work, which I think is important to hold on to a little bit. And at the beginning, it was a really small operation. It was just me. It was really depressing. There was no revenue. And I think the decision to keep pushing through some of those really bleak times, that kind of cyclically resurface, and there's periods of the business that it's just really not enjoyable, to be totally honest. But it goes back to the idea of not wanting to do things alone, because in those moments, had I been alone, I would have definitely caved. Like, my willpower is much weaker than I like to think it is.
That's such
so
a great
in those moments,
I'm so glad you talked about that, because there's like one of the main reasons why I do this show is to create a conversation around the things that are super challenging, the days that make us feel like we want to close the doors and not ever open them again. And the point that that's cyclical is so important. I've worked with people who would meet anyone's definition of success, and they still have that experience. It's just this entrepreneurial like peak and valley situation where you could have a really awesome day, and the next week something feels like catastrophic happened, or you're never going to reach your goal. And it can be really tough because it is on you. A lot of that weight is on you. And then partnership is awesome to pull you out of that, but it's also still on you to make payroll for everyone, So there are these tough days, and they are cyclical. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It doesn't mean you're failing. It's just part of the journey.
Right. Yeah. So I like to, in those moments, vent to somebody, or, have somebody just remind me why I'm still even doing this in the first place. So, big credit to my partner, Todd, but also my wife, Rachel. Without them, certainly without Rachel, the business would have closed in 2013.
Wow. That's awesome. She's a big cheerleader for you. She's a big fan of keeping it going.
Right.
It's so important to have that support system. So it sounds like you kind of half built it. It was half there for you. But I really believe in being intentional about building those supports of people who not only going to be there to support you when you have the down days, but also tell you the truth, whatever that may be. Like, there may be really hard moments, but I find like when you're knee deep in your business all the time, sometimes it's hard to see like what's the objective reality, because you're just in the weeds so much. And so it's nice to have that support system, whether that's mentorship, coaching, a business partner, or a life partner. That's great that you've built that, and that you realize how important that is to your success too. Awesome.
Right. And I think also the ability to hear some of those comments, I think probably for entrepreneurs, sometimes that's the positive bits where, I don't know if this is applicable across the, spectrum, but there's a good deal of, I think, imposter syndrome that people feel, especially when they're just starting out, because in most cases it's a fake it until you make it type situation. And it's almost like perpetually faking it. And so sometimes, allowing yourself to receive both positive and negative feedback and like hear it for what it is really important as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how do you keep yourself grounded in those moments? That is tough to stay open and receive and take it all in, and then have like a good reflective practice on it. Staying grounded in that and not like riding the highs too much and not sinking in the lows too deep. What do you do that helps you with that?
I would say that I'm not totally grounded most of the time, to be honest. But in the moments when I am trying to be grounded, a lot of times with receiving feedback, it's just pausing for a bit and not, having the answer right away. I really struggle with that. Not trying to like fix everything or come up with like the new idea about it. And being able to just sit with something for a second, whether it's comfortable or uncomfortable. And understand that that's somebody's perspective, and their perspective is their reality, and it's different than mine, and they're probably right to some degree. And then take that and plant it in my own self.
Right.
The coffee guy is not grounded.
I know the jokes are coming in. Thanks, Dave, for keeping it exciting. But I love what David Foster said, where he said entrepreneurship is hope over fear. And like you said, that optimism that you hold. And that is probably a key factor in what keeps you going. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think you have, at least in this industry right now, we really have to maintain a level of optimism. And there's a balance between being kind of like toxically optimistic, where you just kind of shut out all of the things that aren't healthy, and don't address them. But right now the situation's pretty bleak for the industry, and everybody's in it. It's like looking at a vase in the middle of the table surrounded by people. Everyone has a different perspective on the same thing.
Right.
And all of it's true, right?
Right. Completely. So what are some key breakthroughs or insights? This is where we get that eye-opener part that you've had over your journey, about 10 years, that really changed the way you showed up as a leader or as a business owner, where it's almost these more like an instance where you feel like maybe you're banging your head against the wall, you're frustrated about something, and then somehow it came to you, you saw this insight, and then it just changed the way that you saw your business going forward.
Sure. One instance of that I don't think was just a particular moment, but it was maybe like a period of time. I got into the industry really young. I had no business background. Didn't know anything about numbers and financials and spreadsheets and stuff like that. And really hated doing it.
It's typical.
I didn't get into it to do numbers, essentially. And as the business grew and more people came on board and my time got, a little bit pushed into the office, so to speak, I had to just focus on numbers. And there was a period of time where, just playing around in Microsoft Excel or like Google Sheets or something, being able to detach myself emotionally from the business and analyze things, and shave 1 or 2% here, add 2% here, and then being able to overlay again the human element, which is why I got into it. And 2% means we can buy this new piece of equipment, or 2% means that we can support this other community organization in this way. And having the numbers really paint a picture of reality in that way allowed that process and those procedures to become really impactful for me. And when we talk about sustainability, I don't want to lie and say that the business is just rock solid sustainable, but going into those spreadsheets, thinking about, okay, cool, I believe in this idea, and this is becoming interesting to me, doing these numbers, because it means that this cool idea is actually going to be here in 10 years versus just 2 weeks.
Right, right. Okay, so that really reinforced the practice for you. You saw its importance when you saw, okay, I could buy this thing, I could, support this initiative, but by realizing that creating those margins or what they would kind of create for the business, that allows you to come back every week and keep doing the numbers and keep doing the things that are not as fun for you, because you recognize how important it really is for the business overall.
Right. And, I'm not going to lie and say that I'm like super consistent with being in that headspace all the time.
Yep.
But yeah, that bit of it was influential for me.
Sure.
In terms of a mind shift.
Yeah. Well, I'm really appreciative that you're not lying today. We need you to be honest here, and that's how we create these eye openers for other people. But I know for me, like, I actually make a practice of it most Fridays, so I'm not going to lie and pretend like I do it every Friday. But I have an intention of doing it most Fridays, where I sit and look at my numbers, and like I try to do a lot of things to put it off. I feel like I need to do an Instagram story to put it off, or like I need to check in with something else. And but once I do it, I feel like I have just such a better handle on where things are at. And I definitely need support around that. So I have an assistant who checks in with me and makes sure I did it, to help reinforce that too. There's something about that peer pressure that really
Well, I think it's really the accountability that you can't get unless you assign it to yourself, especially I think as a business owner or leader or something. There's a phrase that it's lonely at the top, where there's no, I think it's sometimes unreasonable to expect that your employees will hold you accountable, because there's like a totally, out of balance power dynamic. But finding and building and prioritizing, accountability in entrepreneurship is really important.
How have you done that for yourself? Because I completely agree with you that yes, you can have some good employees, but there's always going to be a power dynamic that exists.
Right.
So how, I hear that you were teaching yourself like Excel for fun or something you said on the side. But how did you develop your business acumen and these accountability and leadership skills?
Just by needing to have it, to be honest. And so practically, how did it come about was, I'm a curious person. I'm really interested in things, and I like to know why things are the way they are. As a teenager, that was like really, cause for strife with my parents. But, as an adult, it's, maintaining this like learning mentality and keeping things always open. And so when I don't know how to do something, the internet is a super great place because you can learn anything that you want. And also Rhode Island as a really small state, and the business community is really small. People are really generous with their time. And so just honestly, asking somebody something will get you more further than you think you'll get. And people are generally more generous than you think they are, and really willing to just spill the beans.
That's awesome.
So with regards to like business metrics and accountability and things like that, just asking. I also took a couple of like business courses as part of the 10K SB program.
Yeah, I used to help out at that.
Which was cool. It's there's good things and then there's not so good things about those types of programs. But if you can get a couple of good little nuggets out of it, it's really valuable.
Yeah.
And the community is really important too.
So I'm going to ask you the flip side of that question, which is, what's the thing that you feel is holding you back. So what's maybe something that is currently a weakness or something you don't like to speak on? What's the thing that you're doing now that you feel will hold you back from future success?
Sure. I listened to a podcast one time where the guy had a nickname 80% Al, where he would have an idea and then get it 80% of the way and then kind of like fizzles out. So for me, it's follow through and I'm a starter, but I need to learn to be like a finisher and a doer also. Because I think the blessing and the curse of being somebody that's curious and interested in new ideas is that once the ideas become established, they kind of get a little bit boring. And I'm constantly thinking about the next thing while neglecting the thing that I, should be doing.
Right.
So consistency and finishing is probably my biggest weakness.
Yeah. Have you heard of EOS, Entrepreneurial Operations? Yeah. So like they do a great job of talking about being that visionary versus the integrator, right? Sounds like you need a good integrator.
And I have a great team around me, which is why I don't want to be the best at everything because I can't.
Yeah, that's not sustainable, which is your focus. Totally. Making yourself too central doesn't make sense. So how do I want to ask this next one? How could people best support you right now?
Personally or business-wise?
Well, since you opened that up, why don't you answer for both?
Well, I think maybe if we want to like just broadly say supporting the hospitality community, it's certainly been a tough year for a lot of folks, particularly on the front lines in terms of servers and baristas and, takeout drivers and all those folks who are essential, but on the lower end of the totem pole, just humanizing those types of interactions.
Tipping.
Because tipping is important, but even beyond tipping, if you think about the industry, largely the reason why I got into the industry and the reason why a lot of people stay as a server for 10 years, it's because they really get energized out of the interpersonal bit. And with COVID, it's totally flipped that whole thing upside down. And so everyone's wearing masks. We're behind barriers. We can't really be engaging with each other in the way that we need to be, I think. And so as an entire industry catered around, service and like hospitality and interpersonal, face reading for the most part, all that's been gone. And so I think humanizing those interactions a little bit and, I don't want to like simplify it and say how's, asking somebody how their day was, but, taking it one step beyond and just kind of keeping that bit there, even when it's really hard to do it. And then beyond that, so beyond kind of broad, thinking to your service industry folks is, check in on your people that own businesses, I would say. I would imagine for most industries navigating a year of pandemic and social unrest, and different kind of really important, like tons of consequential stuff happened this past year. Being at the helm of any size company with responsibilities for employees and, income and, people making their mortgage payments and all of that, the burden's pretty heavy for folks, and people are, in positions like mine, are good bullshitters. Sorry to use that word, but they're good at putting the face up, and so just checking in with your people and being there. And then supporting Bolt. You can visit our cafe downtown. You can buy coffee online. You can sign up for a coffee subscription. drink coffee every day.
Yes. Awesome. I love that I gave you the opportunity to plug and you led with taking care of people first. So to me, that just says so much about who you are and what you stand for. And people even captured it in the comments here. And I'm so glad that that could show through, because beyond all of this, like, I love to talk about business and I love to create opportunities for all of us to be better. But at the end of the day, we all just have to be human. And if we can make that central to our focus and showing up and supporting other people and just being a human, it would make all of this a lot better. So thanks for doing that, Bryan. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's a treat.
Awesome. Well, thanks to everybody who joined us in the comment section, who was live online. We love your engagement, love to hear your feedback. If you're watching this after the fact, please still feel free to comment. I know that I will go in there and Bryan can go in there and give answers to questions. If you would like to stay in touch, you can find Bryan's different locations and products online. Like you said, I'll make sure to drop some of those URLs in the comment section below. So thanks again, guys, and we will see you next Friday. Bryan, stay on with me for 1 minute, okay?
Sure. Thank you.
See you, everyone.